We need to discuss ivermectin usage in chickens, and in particularly we need to discuss the different types of ivermectin to use in chickens and the different ways to use ivermectin in chickens, because I have been getting well, 'tis the season for mites, first of all, and I have been getting messages from people asking me why the ivermectin that they're using isn't working to take care of mites, but they're using Ivermectin Injectable topically. And so I'm going to tell you why that won't work. For most of us, we are going to deal with parasites. We are going to need to learn how to manage parasites in our flock, because the reality is parasite infestations, whether they're internal like stomach parasites or external like lice and mites, can cause a whole host of very bizarre problems for our flocks and can ultimately lead to death if left untreated. The good news is that treatment is generally so simple. If you know the symptoms that you're looking for and you know the anti-parasitic medication that will be effective against whatever parasites you're dealing with. So for the purpose of this video, we're going to only be discussing ivermectin, and specifically we're going to be discussing Ivermectin Pour and the Ivermectin Injectable solution. Ivermectin is labeled to treat lice and mites, but more specifically it's labeled to treat scaly leg mites and foul mites. It is also effective against particular internal parasites, stomach worms such as roundworms, cecal worms, capillary worms, gape worms. What it is not effective against is tapeworms. There is conflicting information about the egg withdrawal time when using ivermectin. That means the amount of time that we don't consume or feed back to our chickens or feed to our dogs eggs after treatment. But in general, the accepted egg withdrawal period seems to be anywhere from 7 to 14 days. It's important to note that the composition of the Ivermectin Pour versus the injectable ivermectin is different. The way that the chicken's body absorbs the antiparasitic is different. And so for that reasons, there is different modes of application or ingestion for each of these antiparasitics. And my experience has taught me that actually different forms of administration helps to treat different parasites differently, even though it's still labeled to treat lice, mites, internal parasites. In my experience, the Ivermectin Pour has worked better for me with mites, and Ivermectin Injectable has worked better for me with internal parasites. The Ivermectin Pour works kind of like a Revolution for Cats does, where you put the drops on the skin of the chicken. I like to put them concentrated all around wherever I'm seeing the mites, but it's suggested that you put them around the vent, behind the neck, under the wings, and you want to make sure that the solution touches the skin because it seeps into the skin and gets into the bloodstream via the skin. And look, in general, when I have treated mites and lice with Ivermectin Pour okay, here's the other thing. I prefer Ivermectin Pour for mites. I prefer Elector PSP for lice, but that's another video. But usually with treatment with Ivermectin Pour I will see a diminishment in the mites within 24 hours. With the injectable ivermectin, of course, the most effective means of administration is going to be through injecting, but it can also be given orally. But the important thing is that Ivermectin Pour should not be given orally, and Ivermectin Injectable should not be applied externally. They will not work that way. Ivermectin Pour should be administered at a rate of 0.2 to 0.4 milligrams per kilogram of body weight of the bird. It ends up being about 5 to 7 drops per bird, maybe 3 to 4 if you're dealing with really small bantams, silkies. And the drops can be administered using one of those like small 3cc syringes from Tractor Supply or a feed store. Although some people have told me that eyedroppers work much better. And with the Ivermectin Injectable, if it's being given orally, that can also be given at a dose of 0.4 cc's per kilogram of body weight per bird. If it's being injected, that dosage is 0.2 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. No matter what your method of administration is, you're going to need to plan to retreat in 14 days because ivermectin is only effective against mature adult parasites, and retreatment will be necessary in order to get any eggs that may have hatched in the meantime. I will caution you though that ivermectin is one of those antiparasitics that is used really prevalently with many different species of animals, and there has been some parasite resistance found. For example, I have found that here on my farm, ivermectin is not effective against internal parasites. It's great for mites. It's not effective against internal parasites. So I have to use other means of treatment such as Safeguard, Valbazen, Wormer Deluxe. Anyways, I hope this helps and it's not just more confusing as normal.